I shouldn't remember the exact way her voice sounded that night, but I do. Low, unhurried, like she already knew I wouldn't be able to say no. I was standing in her hallway, holding a small toolbox I barely knew how to use. The ceiling light above us flickered, cheap wiring in an old building, and in that unstable glow her face looked softer, younger, then suddenly stern again. She was in her late 40s, maybe, the kind of woman who carried herself like she had already seen the worst in people and didn't scare easily. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I lived 2 floors down, and she had caught me earlier in the stairwell with an awkward smile. "Do you know anything about loose outlets?" she asked. The truth was I didn't, but I wanted to be useful. Wanted her to look at me the way she did in that first instant. Like I wasn't just another neighbor. So I said yes. And now I was in her apartment, trying not to look at the framed photographs along her wall, trying not to notice the faint smell of perfume that lingered in the air, warmer than the hallway outside. She leaned against the doorframe as I fumbled with the outlet cover. "You don't have to do this, you know," she said. Her tone wasn't dismissive. It was testing. I laughed, though my throat felt dry. "If it starts a fire, I'll take the blame." Her lips curved into something between amusement and curiosity. For a moment she didn't say anything, and the silence stretched too long. I could feel her watching me, and every second of it seemed to tighten in my chest. The outlet cover clattered to the floor. I bent quickly to pick it up, but when I straightened, she hadn't looked away. "You remind me," she began, then stopped herself. Her eyes flickered somewhere past me, and her arms folded across her chest like she had said too much. I didn't push. Maybe I was too afraid of what she might confess. Instead, I said, "The outlet's fine. It just needed tightening." My voice came out steadier than I expected. She studied me in silence, and I noticed her fingers tapping lightly against her arm, like she needed to keep them busy. I should have left then, said goodnight, gone back to my apartment, and pretended this was nothing. But I didn't move. Neither did she. The flickering light above hummed, then steadied. She pushed herself off the doorframe, walked closer, slow, deliberate steps that seemed to echo in the quiet. I smelled her perfume stronger now, something floral, a little sharp, like it clung to her skin more than her clothes. "You fixed it," she said softly, too softly for something so trivial. I nodded, though my breath was uneven. "Yeah." For a beat, we just looked at each other. Too long, too charged. She tilted her head, and the faintest smile tugged at her mouth, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. And then, with the kind of calmness that felt more dangerous than recklessness, she asked, "Do you want to see my room?" My fingers tightened around the handle of the toolbox. My first instinct was to laugh, but the way she said it wasn't a joke. It was an opening, an invitation that carried more weight than the words themselves. I searched her face, looking for irony, but found none. Just steady, patient eyes waiting for me to answer. My throat tightened. "Lead the way," I said. She turned without another word, her shoulder brushing mine as she passed. The quiet of her apartment seemed to grow heavier as I followed her down the short hallway, the toolbox suddenly useless in my hand. And I knew, even before she reached for the door handle, that nothing about this night was going to stay simple. Her bedroom wasn't what I expected. No heavy curtains or candlelit mystery, just a neatly made bed, a stack of books on the nightstand, and a half-empty glass of water leaving a ring on the wood. Real. Lived in. The kind of room that made me feel like I'd intruded on something I wasn't supposed to see. She set a folded sweater across the chair in the corner, like she needed an excuse to move. I stayed by the doorway, toolbox in hand, unsure if I was supposed to step inside or wait to be told. "I don't usually let anyone in here," she said. Her voice was even, but the way she avoided my eyes gave her away. I swallowed. "Why me, then?" Her pause was too long. "Maybe because you didn't ask." The words hit me harder than they should have. There was a weight to them, like they came from somewhere else, something she hadn't said out loud yet. I wanted to ask more, but her expression warned me not to. I finally set the toolbox down, careful not to break the quiet. My eyes drifted, at the soft lines of her shoulders beneath her blouse, at the faint streak of gray in her hair that caught the light, at the bare stretch of her wrist where a watch must have been. Details I shouldn't notice but couldn't help collecting. Dangerous. That's what it was. Not because she was older, though the gap between us pulsed in every silence, but because she carried a gravity that pulled me closer even as I told myself to step back. She sank onto the edge of the bed, elbows on her knees, and for the first time that night she looked tired. Not physically, something deeper, worn thin in a way that made my chest tighten. "Long day?" I asked softer than I meant to. She let out a breath that could have been a laugh or a sigh. "Long year." I didn't press, but the words hung in the air between us, heavier than any explanation could have been. My pulse kicked. I wanted to sit beside her, to bridge that distance, but I didn't. My hands flexed uselessly at my sides instead. Her gaze flicked to me then, sharp and searching, like she wanted to measure what I'd do if she gave me the chance. I held her eyes longer than I should have, and something in the air shifted. "You don't have to rush off," she said suddenly. The casual tone didn't match the tension in her voice. I hesitated. "I wasn't planning to." Her lips pressed together, and before I could add anything, she reached out. Just a small touch on my arm, her fingers grazing fabric. Barely there. But it froze me. I opened my mouth, words threatening to spill. Something reckless. Something I wasn't ready to admit. But I stopped. My throat closed on the thought before it escaped. And in that silence, her hand lingered. Her hand on my arm should have been nothing. A neighborly gesture. A thank you for fixing something small. But the way her fingers lingered, how lightly they pressed into the fabric, it left my skin humming long after she pulled away. I tried to steady myself. I reminded my pulse of her age, of the line between us that shouldn't be blurred. But her silence, the faint way she tilted her head, the soft curve at the corner of her mouth, it all worked against me. "You look nervous," she said, not unkindly. I forced a laugh. "Maybe I'm just not used to being in someone else's room." Her eyes lingered on me a little too long. "Or maybe you're not used to being in my room." That landed with more weight than either of us expected. I looked away, anywhere but at her. The framed photo of her with someone I didn't know, the open book on the nightstand, the clock ticking too loudly. I felt exposed, like she could see everything I was trying not to admit. Before I could think of an answer, her phone buzzed on the dresser. The sound jolted us both. She reached for it quickly, almost too quickly, glancing at the screen before silencing it without answering. "Everything okay?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. "Just someone who thinks I owe them more than I do." The words were clipped, but her voice cracked faintly at the edges. She set the phone face down, fingers pressing against it for a beat too long before pulling back. I wanted to ask more, but she didn't invite the question. Instead, she looked back at me with a faint, almost defiant smile. "Don't worry, you're not the one I'm hiding from." That admission sent a shiver down my spine. She'd let me glimpse something raw, something unguarded, and I couldn't stop myself from stepping a little closer. "I should probably head out," I said, though my body made no move toward the door. The words were a thin excuse, something I clung to so I wouldn't get lost in the way she was watching me. "You could," she murmured, her eyes searching mine. "But you haven't." I didn't know how to answer that. My chest was tight, my throat dry. Every sensible thought told me to retreat, to put distance between us. But the air between us had already thinned too much, and the quiet was pulling me in. Her hand brushed mine this time. Not by accident, not clumsy, but deliberate and slow, as if to see whether I'd flinch or lean closer. I didn't flinch. For a suspended moment, we just stood there, our hands nearly joined. Her perfume wrapping around me like a question, I didn't have the strength to ignore. Then, 3 sharp knocks rattled against her front door. We both froze, breath caught, the spell cracked but not broken. She didn't move. Neither did I. The knocking stopped. The silence after was louder than before. And in that silence, her hand slid closer to mine, until our fingers finally touched. The silence after the knocking stretched too long. I could hear the faint hum of the building's pipes, the steady tick of her bedside clock, my own pulse drumming too fast. Her fingers were still against mine, warm, deliberate, not moving away. "Who was that?" I asked, keeping my voice low, as if speaking too loud might shatter the fragile air. Her eyes didn't leave mine. "Does it matter?" I should have said yes. Should have stepped back, made a joke, anything to cut the tension. But the truth was, it didn't matter. Not to me. Her hand shifted, turning so our palms pressed. A quiet act that felt louder than the knocking had been. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "You're too young to get caught up in my mess," she said finally, her tone sharp but her grip refusing to let go. "You should be out living, not here." I swallowed hard, heat rising in my chest. "And you? Should you be alone in this room? Silencing calls you don't want to answer." Her lips parted, but no sound came. I surprised her, maybe even hurt her. For a heartbeat I thought she'd pull away. But she didn't. "I've made mistakes," she said at last, her voice low, raw. "More than I can count. And now you're standing here, looking at me like—" She broke off, shaking her head as if to erase the thought. "Like what?" I asked, stepping closer before I could stop myself. Her eyes flicked over me, searching, resisting. "Like I'm worth more than I am." The words landed heavy, sharp with self-inflicted wounds. I couldn't let them sit unanswered. "You don't get to decide what you're worth to me." That stopped her. Her chest rose and fell unevenly, and for the first time all night she looked undone, like the careful walls she carried were crumbling in my hands. "You don't know what you're saying," she whispered. "Maybe I don't," I admitted. My voice trembled despite me. "But I know I can't stop thinking about you, even when I tell myself I should." Her breath caught audibly. A flush rose in her cheeks, but whether from anger or something else, I couldn't tell. The quiet between us grew unbearable. I felt the words building in my throat, reckless, undeniable, the line we weren't supposed to cross teetering right there. Then she moved, just a step, but close enough that I felt the warmth of her body against mine. Her eyes locked on me, sharp and searching, daring me to be the one to break the last barrier. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us moved further. Just silence, thick and trembling, holding us in place. And then, in that silence, she asked the question I hadn't prepared for, her voice barely more than a breath. "Do you want this? Or do you just want me to want you?" Her question cut straight through me. "Do you want this? Or do you just want me to want you?" I opened my mouth, but before the answer could come, her phone buzzed again on the dresser. This time she didn't move to silence it. The name flashing across the screen caught my eye, just long enough for me to read it. "Daniel." I froze. She noticed. Her eyes followed mine to the phone, then back to me. The flicker of recognition in her face told me she'd seen my reaction. "My son," she said, voice sharp but quiet, like she wanted the words to sting less than they did. The ground shifted beneath me, not because I hadn't considered she might have a family, but because the name Daniel wasn't just anyone. My stomach tightened. "I know him," I said before I could stop myself. Her brow furrowed. "What?" I swallowed hard, heat crawling up my neck. "Daniel, he's in my class. We've worked on projects together. He's my friend." The silence that fell was brutal. Her face went still, and for a second, I thought she might laugh it off. But no sound came. She just stared at me, her hand slipping from mine like she'd been burned. "You should go," she said finally, voice tight, controlled. I shook my head, words spilling faster than I could manage. Wait, no. You don't understand. I didn't come here for him. I didn't even know you were. That doesn't matter, she cut in. Her eyes were glassy now, the first crack of vulnerability showing through. You're his age, his friend. And she stopped herself, pressing a hand to her forehead. This was a mistake. Her words slammed into me, but beneath them, something else lingered. A tremor in her voice, the way her eyes wouldn't quite meet mine. Regret, yes, but also fear. Fear of what she wanted and couldn't justify. I stepped forward, against every warning sign in my head. Was it? A mistake. Her eyes finally locked onto mine, sharp, wet, accusing. Don't do that. Do what? My voice broke. Pretend none of this is real? Pretend I don't feel what I feel just because he's your son. Her lips trembled, and for a second she looked younger, fragile, as if the weight of her own life had finally caught up with her. You don't know what you're risking, she whispered. Then tell me, I said. Tell me and I'll leave. But if you don't... I took a step closer, my chest almost brushing hers now. Then it means you feel it too. The phone buzzed again, insistent, loud in the thick air. We both turned to look at it, its glow cutting through the dim room. Her hand hovered in the air, torn between answering and reaching for me. She didn't move, neither did I, and in that pause, everything we thought we could control began to unravel. The phone buzzed again, louder this time, almost vibrating off the dresser. Neither of us moved to stop it. We just stood there, the sound wedged between us like a wall we couldn't climb. Finally, she spoke, her voice rough. You should answer it for me. I frowned. Why? Her eyes glistened, though she blinked hard to hide it. Because I can't. Not when you're standing here. I didn't reach for the phone. Instead, I looked at her, really looked. The faint crease at the edge of her eyes, the way her shoulders sagged under weight I couldn't carry for her. She wasn't untouchable. She wasn't a mystery. She was just a woman. Tired, conflicted, and terrified of what it meant to want something that didn't make sense. I don't care that he's your son, I said finally, my voice breaking. I care that I can't stop thinking about you. Every time you look at me, it's like I forget how old I am, or how old you are. It's just us. Nothing else. Her lips parted like she wanted to answer, but her throat worked soundlessly before she closed her mouth again. She turned her head, hiding her face with a hand pressed against her temple. You think that sounds romantic, she whispered, almost to herself. But in a year you'll regret it. You'll wish you'd kept your distance. Then let me regret it, I said. But don't decide for me. That made her turn. Her eyes locked on mine, sharp and unsteady, like she was balancing on the edge of a cliff. For a long moment we didn't breathe. And then she exhaled, a shuddering release, and shook her head. You make it sound so simple. It is, I said. Either we walk away now, or we stop pretending we don't want this. The air between us tightened, pulling us closer until it felt like one of us would break just by standing still. Her hand rose, slow, uncertain, and touched my cheek. It was the gentlest touch, but it set every nerve in me alight. I haven't let anyone in for a long time, she said, her voice trembling. And now you're here, and it's wrong, and it's reckless, and... Her voice caught, tears threatening. And it feels like I can finally breathe. My own chest ached at that. I covered her hand with mine, holding it against my face. Then breathe. We stood there in silence, her eyes wet, mine unsteady, but neither of us pulling away. The phone stopped buzzing. The room went still, and for the first time all night, there were no interruptions. Just us, too close, too raw, too honest to retreat. She didn't say yes. I didn't say no. But when her forehead rested against mine, when the silence thickened into something that felt like a promise, I knew the decision had already been made. When the phone finally stopped buzzing, It left behind a silence that felt different. Not heavy like before, but open, like we'd both stepped past a point where turning back wasn't possible. She kept her hand on my cheek, but her eyes had softened. There was no wall in them now, no practiced distance. Just the raw truth of a woman who had been holding her breath too long. "I don't know how this ends," she said quietly. "Neither do I admitted. "But I know how it starts. Right here." Her laugh was small, broken, but it reached me deeper than anything else she'd said that night. She leaned against me, her forehead resting just above my shoulder, and for a moment it felt like we were weightless, suspended in something fragile but real. I thought about Daniel, her son, my friend, about the names and labels that could turn what we had into scandal. But more than that, I thought about her, how she looked when the mask slipped, when she let herself be seen, when she admitted she was tired of pretending she didn't want more. She pulled back just enough to look at me again. "This doesn't fix my past," she murmured. "It doesn't erase my mistakes." "I'm not here to erase them," I said. "I'm here because I see you. All of it. And I'm still here." Her eyes searched mine, testing for cracks, waiting for hesitation. But there wasn't any. Not in that moment. And slowly, cautiously, she nodded, as if granting herself permission for the first time. When our lips finally met, it wasn't fireworks or recklessness. It was quiet, careful, a confession in the form of a kiss, more honest than words could have been. Afterward, we didn't speak right away. We didn't need to. The weight of what we'd chosen, what we couldn't take back, settled between us, but it didn't crush us. If anything, it grounded us. She smiled faintly, brushing her thumb against my jaw. "You're going to make my life complicated." I smiled back. "Then at least it won't be quiet anymore." For the first time, she didn't argue.